Okay, so I have two news items that caught my eyes last week, actually, and I think they have relevance for the broader context of this fight between pro and con energy politics. And the first item comes from Germany, and there's a German professor named Nico Pech, and he had an interview in German public radio last week, and he is a growth critic and economist. And so he had something to say about the proposed CO2 tax in Germany, which is now proposed to be about 180 euros, which is around about $200 per metric ton of CO2. And so he said that the political support for a price on CO2 that is really biting and making a difference is simply not there. So this is far too cheap for a price per ton of CO2, and this wouldn't make a difference. And I agree with him on that. And he says it's also paradoxical that we would advocate protection of the climate, yet at the same time, policies in Germany promote everything that is damaging the climate, from air travel, building more homes, eating meat, driving cars, and so on. So everything that's going on in the economy, according to him, is sort of damaging the climate, which is true in the sense that everything requires CO2 emissions, of course. And so German politics, of course, have been inconsequential. They didn't substantially reduce CO2 emissions, and the renewable energy technology has so far failed to have any substantial impact, which is true. He's very honest on that. And then he kind of advocates his own thing, which is social pressure, asking your neighbors, why are you booking an ocean cruise for vacation? Why are you driving SUVs and so on? So this is his sort of solution for the political non-accomplishment of real CO2 reductions in Germany.
I mean,
And
that sounds very old school East German.
yeah, kind of. Although the East German government didn't really have that goal, it's just the outcome of their political and economic system, I think. So they wanted to be more productive, building more tanks and so on.
No, but I just mean like neighbors reporting on neighbors and
Oh yeah, oh yeah, I see your point. Yeah,
everybody
that's true.
controlling everybody's business.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe it's a unified
One
German thing.
question, Stefan, before you move on, just to help us clarify. So he's saying that this almost $200 carbon tax, is not enough. Can you give like a ballpark figure about what that would mean in terms of like the gasoline prices that a person would pay, just so that people get like the magnitude of what he's saying wouldn't work?
So I don't know exactly the numbers from the top of my head, but that would have already have a substantial impact, like a quarter uh, price spike for gasoline or diesel, something like that. I believe, but that's so it would have a substantial impact on the price in percentages, but it wouldn't mean that people stop driving because of this. Because driving, is just so valuable that you wouldn't stop doing that. You would still emit maybe a little bit less CO2, but you would still, use your car or, travel to your vacation via air travel and so on. So I agree with him in the sense that, oh yeah, even when we see price spikes in fuels, in fossil fuels, we don't see a massive reduction. Like when, the oil embargo in the 1970s and 80s happened, that didn't like end the driving. Temporarily, it caused a bottleneck in fuel supply, but people were willing to pay the higher price of gasoline and diesel. So, and then he has this solution for that. So the social pressure thing, and then also he advocates a post-growth economy, and that would entail dismantling the industry with a reduction of work hours of 20 to 20 hours per week for an industrial worker, and income losses accordingly, because he acknowledges that yes, we need to become poorer if we really want CO2 reductions. And then he suggests in your free time you do something else, like growing your own food in your backyard or something else. He's honest and consequential in his thinking. Like, if really the goal is to massively reduce CO2 emissions, that would make a difference in climate. The rich people need to get poor and the poor people in the world need to stay poor. Um, I would argue with him that this is not really how it pans out. There will probably be not the same number of people on the planet after his central planning takes place.
Yeah, I mean, no growth is really a misnomer because all
Yeah.
you can do is a a economy either progresses or it collapses. There's no such thing as level growth, in part because we can't do the same things over and over. We have to get better at doing them. And even if you just look at resources, right? Like if you said,
Mhm.
let's just use the same amount of oil and gas every year, well, it gets harder and harder to find. So you need people to be engaging in innovation, even to stay the same, let alone for things to get better. So if you just ban our ability to innovate, what it really means is the complete inability to have technology at all.
Right. So, in the sense, compared to what advocates of something like the Green New Deal in the United States have been saying about, we will create new jobs and be better off actually after like so and so many decades, we will be richer and just do the same thing that we do today, just more efficient and with better technology. He acknowledges this is not true. We need to be poorer as a result of the proper policies as he advocates them. Now, this is, a German professor, an academic with a bizarre anti-human flourishing agenda, and might ask, how is this relevant? Like, what's the news here? Like, Germans are crazy in energy policies. That's true, but I want to compare that with something that is supposedly much, much, much better and different. And this comes from the United States Senate, and the Senate has recently passed um, a new bill that was initiated by Lisa Murkowski, who is a senator from Alaska for the Republican Party. And it's called the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act. And it's supposed to improve the situation of US nuclear reactors and the operators of these reactors financially by allowing 40-year power purchasing contracts for the government. Right now, it's restricted to 10 years at above market rates. So this could help increasing the profits of nuclear power operators, and it also will accelerate the development of advanced nuclear reactors. Under the government programs. So I would disagree with many of this. Particularly, I think the government needs to get out of the way instead of getting involved more and more financially in these things. But a lot of nuclear advocates will probably welcome this kind of development where the government takes interest, a positive interest in nuclear power. And so Lisa Murkowski is known from everything I've seen. She's from Alaska and she's pro energy development in Alaska, so oil and gas and so on. So she's sort of on the right side of things, even if you disagree on any particulars. But I want to read you two quotes from her in reaction to passing of the bill. So the first one is, I'm excited to be moving legislation related to nuclear energy, mineral security, energy efficiency, and carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration out of the committee. So this is what this legislation is about. And then she says these measures will help develop innovative technologies. Okay, that's the nuclear part. Responsibly reduce our energy and water consumption and protect our economy and national security. Now, this is interesting to me because it actually acknowledges the green ideal of reduced energy consumption, water conservation, getting more energy efficient, and protect our economy and national security. This is a bit vague because it could be related to the nuclear stuff in a sense of the fuel cycle. But this is also the rhetoric that the Greens usually use, right? They're saying, well, we want, to be more efficient, and then we can do the same things over and over again in the future with better technology. And what I find interesting is that this minimizing your footprint ideology is so widespread that if you're looking for candidates in the US Senate, even those that are supposedly pro energy and would be named climate deniers and fossil fuel shills by the opponents, even these people adopt a certain type of language that acknowledges the green ideal of minimizing the footprint. So although the German professor, of course, is much more radical, and Murkowski is not remotely on that level of anti-human flourishing, I think we are losing the uphill battle right now because we do not acknowledge that the ideal of the Greens are wrong. This ideal is wrong, and we do adopt their language in framing things. So every time some legislation gets passed, even if it's pro-nuclear and pro-more energy, we sort of have to, compromise in the language, or the politicians feel they have to compromise on the language and say, well, this is actually promoting energy efficiency and, minimize our footprint and conserve some water and so on. So it's not the opposite of the Green New Deal. It's just we have either the Green New Deal radicals or we have a compromised version of that. Maybe with a few nuclear reactors tossed into the wind and solar future that we aim for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a really deep current of guilt that runs through people, that we've been taught to feel guilty about the very thing that enables us to survive, and that is transforming nature and impacting nature. And that, some people are crusading in the name of destroying our ability to do that. But then even the people who are resisting it saying, well, look, we have to do it somewhat. We have to have some impact. There's a real kind of guilt and saying, well, let's do it as little as we can get away with, versus being really proud to be a human being that has the potential to transform nature so that we can live a real human life. I mean, I think Alex has talked about, whether in this podcast or in various places, there's a scene in a book that we mention all the time, Atlas Shrugged, where you have this industrialist sitting in his house and there's a nice party going on and he's watching a storm outside and reflecting on this fact that how amazing is it that, every other animal is just caught in this storm, and we would be too if we hadn't used the power of the human mind in order to improve our human environment. And just taking a real pride in that. And part of that would be being really proud of the fact that we can create as much energy as we do today, and being very ambitious and wanting to have a lot more energy and use a lot more energy in the future. And of course, you want to use less energy, all else being equal, to achieve the same goal. But you want to use as much energy as you can so that you can make human flourish, so that humans can flourish as much as possible. And even that as a goal strikes people as something that they definitely don't take pride in. And then that makes you very vulnerable to the people who say, no, we don't want to compromise. We want to have no growth. We want to have real poverty, because they are just being more consistent with a basic ideal that you've implicitly accepted. And I think most people accept it unwittingly and unknowingly, but it still does damage. And that's why I think one of our top priorities at the Center for Industrial Progress is just to offer a new ideal of human flourishing that is consistent with human progress, and it's consistent with industrial progress and anti-pollution. That is, we're concerned with minimizing negative impacts. And I think that points to, as dispiriting as today's debate is, there's a real opportunity to differentiate yourself. If you're a Republican, you can differentiate yourself from the Democrats, not by letting them own the issue of environment, but precisely by taking over the issue of human flourishing, including a flourishing human environment.